Captain James Riker had always believed that no world could shock him anymore. He had seen planets of fire, oceans of gas, and forests that glowed like stars. But Thalkara Prime was different. The moment his boots touched the glowing purple sand, a chill ran down his spine. Towering stone pillars rose from the plains like ancient sentinels, and twin suns hung low, casting long, strange shadows. The air was thick with an energy he couldn't name. Every instinct screamed caution, but there was awe too, deep in his chest. James glanced at his small human squad. Faces were tense, eyes scanning the horizon. Weapons were ready, but there was no enemy in sight yet, only the alien world stretching endlessly before them. Then he saw them. From the shadows of the jagged pillars, the warrior women appeared. They were unlike anything James had ever seen. Over 7 feet tall, muscles sleek beneath shining armor, their presence demanded attention. Their eyes glowed faintly silver, reflecting the twin suns like mirrors. Weapons hung at their sides, but they didn't move aggressively. Yet. Each step was precise, almost ceremonial, their long strides eating the distance between the pillars and the humans. James's squad froze, unsure how to respond. James felt his heart thump in his chest, a strange mixture of fear and awe. There was something almost magical about these warriors. Every detail, the curve of their armor, the sharp angles of their faces, the fluidity of their movements, spoke of power, discipline, and beauty. He blinked, unprepared for the emotion that surged through him. His training told him to stay silent, to observe. But something deeper urged him forward. The lead warrior stepped out first. Her armor shimmered like liquid silver. She tilted her head, analyzing the humans with a sharp intelligence that made James instinctively straighten. There was no fear in her gaze, only calculation. He realized she was assessing him, weighing his threat. James raised his hand slowly, a universal gesture of peace. "We come in peace," he said, voice steady but quiet. "We mean no harm to your people." His squad mirrored him, though tension remained high. The warrior women didn't respond immediately. They simply watched. For a moment, James felt the weight of their scrutiny. Every soldier's training melted under the intensity of those glowing eyes. He could see their muscles tense and relax, their hands hover near their weapons. And then in a thoughtless, instinctive decision, he did something that no human probably should have. "You are beautiful," James said. His voice softer now, almost a whisper to himself but loud enough for the nearest warrior to hear. The battlefield froze. The warrior women blinked in unison, the tiniest flicker of shock in their eyes. Weapons didn't drop, but their stances wavered. James felt the silence stretch, thick and heavy, like time itself had paused. His squad shifted nervously, unsure what had just happened. He could almost feel the air pulse with tension and disbelief. Then he stepped closer, careful to stay unthreatening. I mean it," he added louder. "Not just your strength, but everything. Your presence, your courage, the way you move. It's extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it." For the first time, the silver-armored leader's posture softened. One of her hands fell slightly away from her weapon. Another warrior blinked slowly, as if trying to understand a concept that was entirely foreign. It was clear to James now. They had never been told they were beautiful before. Their culture valued strength above all else, and words of admiration, kindness, or truth like this were probably unknown. And in that moment, James realized something that made his chest tighten. He wasn't just complimenting them. He was reaching their hearts. His words were dangerous, revolutionary even, but something in the hesitant, frozen stances of the warrior women told him that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something extraordinary. The wind whispered through the alien pillars, carrying a scent sweet and strange. James took a slow breath. "You deserve to know it," he said quietly, not just for the warriors, but for himself too. The battlefield remained tense, but James could feel a subtle change. The women were no longer just warriors. They were beings capable of surprise, of curiosity, of something he had never expected. Wonder. For a long moment, the battlefield seemed to hold its breath. The warrior women stood motionless, their glowing silver eyes locked on James. The words he had spoken hung in the air like an impossible truth. His squad whispered nervously, glancing at him as if he had lost his mind. "Captain, what just—" one of them began, but James raised a hand, signaling silence. The warrior women weren't moving. Their weapons were still at the ready, but something about their stances had changed. The leader, The one in silver armor tilted her head slightly, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. Shock flickered across her features, a sensation James had never imagined seeing in a creature so fearsome. Another warrior behind her blinked rapidly, her grip on her weapon loosening for just a fraction of a second. James's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a strange mixture of awe and empathy. He realized painfully that these warriors had never heard words like his before. They had spent their lives in battle, measured only by strength and skill. Compliments, kindness, admiration, they were foreign, almost taboo. And yet, he had spoken the truth. "I mean it," he said, taking a cautious step forward. "You're not just strong. You're extraordinary. Everything about you is beautiful. The way you fight, the way you carry yourselves, the courage in your eyes. I've never seen anything like you." The silence deepened. The warrior women seemed to shrink slightly, as if the words had weight beyond what they could bear. James could see the inner struggle in their eyes, between duty and the strange, unfamiliar feeling he had awakened. One of the younger warriors hesitated, glancing at her comrades as if to confirm that she had understood him correctly. Then a small, almost imperceptible movement occurred. The silver-armored leader lowered her weapon slightly. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction, and her eyes softened just a little. Another warrior mirrored her, though more slowly, cautiously. James knew in that instant that he had reached them, not through threat or force, but through truth. Before he could say more, a low rumble shook the sands. From the distance, the sound of approaching warriors echoed across the battlefield. A squad of younger, more aggressive aliens had noticed the humans' presence and were charging toward them. The warrior women tensed immediately, their old instincts returning in full force. Weapons were raised, eyes narrowed, and the air thickened with the anticipation of combat. James stayed still, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Don't fight unless you must," he called out. "We can be allies." His voice carried a firmness that matched the calm courage he felt inside. The silver-armored leader hesitated, eyes flicking between James and the approaching squad. Slowly, she raised one hand, a signal that stopped the younger warriors in their tracks. The battlefield froze once more, but this time not from shock. This was respect, curiosity, and the weight of an unspoken trust. James realized how fragile and powerful that trust was. He had entered a world of warriors who valued strength above all else, and yet, a single honest word had paused them, had made them question something deeper. "You're more than warriors," he said quietly, stepping closer, careful to stay unthreatening. "You have strength and beauty together. That is something worth knowing, and something worth protecting." The silver-armored leader looked at him, and for the first time, James thought he saw hope in her eyes. Not hope for herself, but hope for a world where warriors could feel more than duty in battle, where admiration and kindness could exist alongside power. The alien sun beat down on the purple sands, and James could feel the energy shift around him. These warriors, once statues of strength and fear, were changing before his eyes. And in their frozen shock, he understood something profound. Sometimes, the simplest truth, spoken bravely and sincerely, can move mountains, or even freeze warriors in awe. For the first time, James realized that this mission would not just test his skill as a soldier, it would test his heart, and his courage to speak truths that others might fear. The distant rumble of approaching warriors grew louder, shaking the purple sands beneath James's boots. The younger alien squad was close now, their armor gleaming under the twin suns. Their intent was clear. They would not hesitate to attack. But the warrior women in front of James remained unusually still. The pause was not fear. It was conflicted strength, a struggle between instinct and something they had never experienced before. James watched the silver-armored leader Thyra as she raised her hand slowly. The approaching squad halted in their tracks, hesitating, waiting for the command. James felt a shiver of awe. These warrior women were disciplined beyond anything he had imagined. But now something deeper had emerged, a willingness to listen, to trust, even when their instincts screamed otherwise. "Do not fight unless necessary," James called out again, his voice firm yet calm. "We are not your enemies. Let them see that." Thyra's gaze met his, and for the first time James sensed a connection. A silent understanding passed between them. She nodded once, a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, then turned to face her warriors. Slowly, one by one, they mirrored her, lowering their weapons just enough to show restraint. James's heart pounded. He realized the at his words had done more than compliment them. They had altered the course of a battle before it even began. The younger warriors, confused by the hesitation of their elders, advanced cautiously. They had never seen such a pause in the heat of combat. Thyra stepped forward, her presence commanding absolute attention. She moved with fluid precision, her every motion a lesson in grace and control. The younger squad faltered under her gaze, unsure of what to do. James could see the battle was no longer about raw strength. It was about control, courage, and the new emotions his words had sparked. James took a careful step forward, letting his hands show he was unarmed. "You are incredible," he said quietly, almost to himself. "All of you. Your power, your skill, your courage. It is awe-inspiring." He saw something unexpected in Thyra's eyes, vulnerability mixed with curiosity. She had never experienced admiration without judgment before. It frightened her, yet it intrigued her at the same time. Then the air shifted. A sudden gust of wind stirred the sand, and the young alien squad attempted to push forward again. Thyra's warriors moved in unison, a silent wall of strength and restraint. James marveled at the coordination, the combination of raw power and newfound patience. The warrior women were no longer just fighters. They were leaders, guardians, and protectors, guided not just by duty but by respect for the human who had dared to speak truth to them. James's mind raced. He understood now that he had done something rare. He had bridged a gap between cultures in a single daring moment. His words had sparked thought, emotion, and hesitation in creatures bred for war. He realized how fragile trust could be, yet how potent it was when earned honestly. "Look at them," he whispered to his squad. "They are capable of more than just battle. They are capable of hope." The battle did not erupt that day. The younger squad retreated, confused and cautious, leaving the warrior women and humans alone on the purple sands. For a long while, the only sound was the wind and the distant hum of alien energy. James looked at Thyra again. She nodded slightly, acknowledging him not just as a human, but as someone who had seen them truly, without fear, without mockery, without threat. As the twin suns dipped lower, painting the pillars in gold and purple, James realized the truth of what had happened. Strength was not just measured in weapons or combat skill. Strength was measured in courage, the courage to be honest, to speak truths that others might never hear, and to see the humanity in someone who seemed so different. In the silence of that alien battlefield, something extraordinary had happened. The warrior women were no longer statues of power and fear. They were beings capable of emotion, reflection, and awe, and James understood that perhaps the most important victories were not won with weapons but with words. Days passed on Thalcara Prime, and the tension in the air slowly began to change. James and his human squad remained cautious, but the warrior women who had once frozen in shock now observed him differently. Thyra, the silver-armored leader, often lingered nearby, her eyes thoughtful, her movements less rigid. There was a quiet curiosity in the way she studied James and his small team. At first, communication was almost impossible. The warrior women spoke in clipped, sharp tones, each word precise and measured. James had learned a few gestures from observation, simple signs for peace, attention, and respect. But language remained a barrier. Still he tried, using basic words, showing objects and pointing to actions. Slowly, a bridge formed, built on patience and honesty rather than speed or force. James began to notice small, human-like expressions on the warrior women's faces. Thyra would tilt her head when confused. Selka would frown slightly when frustrated, and Elira, quiet and reserved, often watched James with eyes that seemed to ask questions without words. Each observation made James's heart swell with a strange, hopeful pride. These warriors, so powerful and disciplined, were beginning to trust a human, a fragile, careful trust, but trust nonetheless. One evening, as the twin suns dipped behind jagged pillars, James gathered his courage and spoke. "You saved us yesterday," he said softly. "You could have attacked, but you didn't. That is honor. And strength. And courage. All of it, and I respect you for it." Thyra's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She had never expected a human to understand what mattered in her culture, let alone acknowledge it. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Selka and Elira glanced at each other, and James could sense a shift. The ice of shock and hesitation that had frozen them was melting, replaced by something warmer, something human-like. Over the following days, James shared more of himself. He told stories of Earth, of music, laughter, and sunsets. He showed simple games and gestures of camaraderie. At first, the warrior women observed with suspicion, but curiosity began to outweigh caution. Selka laughed one day, a soft, startled sound, when James mimicked the movement of a dancing bird. Thyra's shoulders relaxed, and even Elira allowed a quiet, shy smile. James realized that connection was forming. It was fragile, like the first shoots of a plant breaking through alien soil, but it was real. The warrior women, once statues of battle and discipline, were beginning to experience emotions beyond duty and strength. They were learning that they could feel admiration, joy, and even trust without betraying who they were. One night, as the stars began to glow faintly in the alien sky, Thyra spoke in careful, halting words. "I never thought anyone would see us this way," she said. "Strong, terrifying. Yes, but beautiful?" Her voice trembled slightly, and James felt a surge of emotion. He nodded gently. "Exactly," he replied. "You have always been beautiful. I just wanted you to know it." The warrior women were silent for a moment, absorbing the words. Then slowly, a feeling of relief and wonder seemed to ripple through them. James could see it in their posture, the softness of their movements, the way their eyes glimmered with something they had never felt before. Acceptance, pride, and a sense of being truly seen. In that quiet moment under alien stars, James understood something profound. Strength and beauty were not opposites. Courage and vulnerability could coexist, and sometimes all it took was one human voice, brave enough to speak the truth, to awaken it in those who had never experienced it before. For the first time, the warrior women were not just defenders of their world. They were beings capable of wonder, capable of trust, capable of seeing themselves through someone else's eyes. And James realized he had become more than a visitor. He had become a bridge, a reminder that connection could transcend worlds, species, and centuries of tradition. Not everyone welcomed James or his words. As the days passed, whispers reached him from the warrior women themselves, rumors of dissent, disapproval from the elders who ruled the clans. These elders were ancient and unyielding, their minds forged over centuries of battle and tradition. To them, James was an intruder, a dangerous human who had dared to speak truths that challenged everything their culture held sacred. James could feel the tension the first time he met them. The elders' armor was heavier, darker than the warrior women he had come to know. Their eyes were sharp, piercing, and full of judgment. They spoke in clipped, formal tones, accusing James of manipulation, of weakening the warriors, of corrupting centuries of discipline. Thyra and the others stood beside him, silent but tense, unsure how to defend a human in their presence. James met their gaze calmly. He knew anger or fear would only worsen the divide. "I do not seek to change your ways," he said slowly, choosing each word with care. "I only wish to see the truth in your people and let them see it too. Strength and beauty, courage and kindness, they can exist together. I only spoke what I saw." The elders hissed among themselves, the low sound vibrating through the stone pillars. "Humans cannot understand," one elder said, his voice like grinding metal. "Your words confuse them. Your presence confuses them. You bring weakness in the guise of admiration." James nodded. He understood. Their perspective was shaped by centuries of survival and tradition. But he also saw the subtle reactions in the warrior women, the way Thyra's shoulders did not slump but held taller, how Selka's eyes glimmered with pride instead of fear, how Elira's quiet confidence grew just by standing beside him. He realized that his presence was not weakening them, it was awakening something they had never allowed themselves to feel. "Look at them," James said softly, gesturing to Thyra and the others. "They are stronger, braver, and more capable than ever. Not because of me, but because they can see themselves through new eyes. That is your strength too. That is what I honor." A tense silence followed. The elders studied their warriors, noting the subtle changes, the softening of expressions, the careful smiles, the trust glimmering in their eyes. It was undeniable. James's words had sparked a shift that no order or command could erase. Thyra stepped forward slightly, the weight of her authority quiet but firm. Her gaze swept the elders, steady and unwavering. Even the elders could not dismiss it. They could see the change, though they would not admit it openly. James had shown them a truth that had always existed but had never been acknowledged. Admiration and respect did not diminish strength. They enhanced it. Courage could include kindness, and power could coexist with beauty. Over the next few days, the elders began to test the warriors. Small trials of strength and skill, meant to measure obedience and focus, were conducted, James observed quietly. The warriors excelled, but there was a new spark in their movements, a lightness, a confidence, a pride that had not existed before. The elders could not help but notice. Their expressions softened ever so slightly, grudging but undeniable. James realized then something extraordinary. One human voice, spoken with honesty and respect, had shifted a culture without violence. The warrior women were not defying their elders. They were evolving, growing stronger in ways tradition had never allowed. And the elders, who had feared disruption, began to understand that strength could take new forms, forms that included emotion, trust, and recognition. That night, James sat under the alien stars with Thyra, Selka, and Elira. The twin suns had set, leaving a deep violet sky above. "They are starting to see it," James said softly. "They may not admit it yet, but they are beginning to understand what you already know, that being admired and being strong are not opposites." Thyra nodded, a rare softness in her eyes. "You showed us something we never thought possible," she said quietly. "That courage can include hope, that power can include heart." James smiled, feeling the weight of months of tension lift ever so slightly. The cultural divide was not gone, but it had been bridged in part. And for the first time, the warrior women truly felt seen, respected, and understood. Weeks passed on Thalkara Prime, and the distance between James and the warrior women began to shrink in ways neither side had anticipated. The battlefield, once a place of tension and caution, became a place of learning, laughter, and connection. The silver-armored leader Thyra often walked alongside James, observing not with suspicion but curiosity. Selka and Elira followed in her wake, their expressions softening with each shared moment. James began training with them, not as a commander but as a peer, sharing techniques and strategies. His human strength was modest compared to theirs, but his creativity, quick thinking, and empathy were something they had never encountered. Thyra watched him with a mixture of intrigue and respect. "You fight differently," she said one day, dodging a sweeping blow and countering with careful precision. "Not with raw power, but with thought." James smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "We all have our ways," he replied. "Strength isn't just muscle. It's courage, judgment, and trust. And sometimes, it's heart." The warrior women began to open up, revealing sides of themselves they had long kept hidden. Thyra confided fears she had buried for centuries. The pressure of leadership, the weight of expectation, the loneliness of always being seen as a weapon rather than a person. Selka shared stories of past battles, tales of loyalty, sacrifice, and rare moments of humor. Elira, usually quiet and reserved, surprised James with gentle laughter during a playful training exercise, her eyes sparkling with joy he had never imagined seeing in a warrior. James realized the truth of what was happening. Trust and vulnerability were spreading like light through their ranks. They had learned to respect him, yes, but more than that, they were beginning to allow themselves to feel, to express, to connect. It was fragile and delicate, yet it was real. One evening, as the twin suns set behind jagged purple cliffs, James and the warrior women sat together on the sands, watching shadows stretch across the battlefield. "I never thought I would feel like this," Thyra admitted quietly. "To laugh, to share, to not always be armor and weapons." Her voice trembled slightly, but there was relief and wonder in her eyes. James nodded, understanding. Being strong doesn't mean you cannot feel. It doesn't mean you cannot be seen as beautiful. It means you can carry both courage and tenderness, and that is more powerful than anything a weapon can do. Selka smiled, the first real unguarded smile he had seen from her. Elira's eyes met his, conveying more than words could: gratitude, understanding, and a connection that transcended language. James felt a lump in his throat. In a world so alien and different, he had found friendship, trust, and understanding. The nights that followed were filled with stories, shared meals, and quiet moments under the stars. James taught them about Earth, its music, its humor, its simple joys. Thera and the others listened intently, fascinated by the strange planet and the strange human who had dared to tell them the truth about themselves. And slowly, their armor of doubt, habit, and centuries of discipline began to soften. James understood that this bond was more than friendship. It was revolutionary, not in weapons or conquest, but in emotion, in culture, and in spirit. He had bridged a gap that many thought impossible. These warrior women, once frozen in shock at a human's words, had now allowed him into their hearts, and in doing so, they had opened a door to a new way of being, strong, proud, and fully alive. As the twin suns disappeared below the horizon and the purple sands darkened, James looked at Thyra, Selka, and Alira. He saw strength, courage, and beauty intertwined, and he knew in that quiet, powerful moment that this bond born of honesty, respect, and compassion was something neither time, tradition, nor distance could ever break. The day James had to leave came too soon. The twin suns were low in the sky, painting the alien landscape in shades of gold and violet. The purple sands shimmered like molten glass beneath the light, and the towering stone pillars cast long shadows over the gathering of warrior women. Thyra, Selka, and Alira stood at the edge of the cliffs, silent but proud. Their armor, once intimidating and rigid, now reflected the soft glow of the suns, symbols not only of strength but of the transformation they had experienced. James approached them slowly, heart heavy. He had trained, fought, and lived among them, but more importantly, he had shared truth, admiration, and respect. He had seen the spark of humanity, or at least the spark of something deeply personal, within beings who had lived only by duty and combat. He felt honored to witness it. Thyra stepped forward, her silver armor glinting. She studied him carefully, as she always did, but now her expression was softer, warmer, filled with gratitude. "You have shown us more than strength," she said quietly. "You have shown us who we truly are." Her voice trembled with emotion, unaccustomed as she was to speaking beyond commands and discipline. James smiled, swallowing the lump in his throat. "You've always known," he said. "You are always strong, brave, and beautiful. I only reminded you. Now the world can see it too, because you are not frozen in fear or doubt anymore. You can be warriors and still be yourselves." Selka stepped forward, placing her hand briefly on James's shoulder, a gesture of trust, respect, and connection. "We never thought this possible," she said softly. "To fight, to lead, and still feel, still be seen. Your words changed us." Alira, quiet as ever, approached last. Her eyes met James's, and for a moment no words were needed. The warmth and understanding in that look conveyed everything she felt: gratitude, trust, and a newfound sense of freedom. James realized that sometimes connection transcended language entirely. As James prepared to board his ship, the elders watched from a distance, their faces unreadable. Yet James could feel their reluctant approval. Though they would not speak of it openly, he knew that the warrior women had gained something profound: the courage to embrace both strength and vulnerability, power and beauty, discipline and heart. James paused for a final look at the alien horizon. The pillars, the sands, and the twin suns, the world had changed in ways subtle but lasting. He realized that humanity's greatest gift was not its weapons, its technology, or its numbers, but its courage to see the truth, speak it, and honor it. "Remember," he said quietly, turning to Thyra and her companions, "strength is not diminished by kindness. Courage is not lessened by admiration. And beauty, real beauty, comes from the heart." Thyra nodded solemnly, and for the first time James saw a rare smile, a soft, confident, and genuine expression that belonged entirely to her. Selka and Alira mirrored it, a reflection of change that was no longer fragile, but enduring. The ship lifted from the sands, carrying James away from Thalkara Prime. He looked down and saw the warrior women standing tall, not just as defenders of their world, but as beings fully aware of their own worth, their own beauty, and their own strength. Their eyes followed him not with suspicion or fear, but with respect, admiration, and trust. As the twin suns sank behind the horizon, James understood something he would carry forever. HFY, the essence of humanity, was not in domination or conquest, but in courage, connection, and the bravery to speak truth. One human had reminded an entire culture that strength and beauty could coexist. and that small acts of honesty could echo across worlds. And for the first time, the warrior women were truly seen. James smiled, letting the engines hum beneath him. The universe was vast, strange, and often frightening. But it was moments like this, moments of recognition, trust, and courage, that made it worth exploring. He had left a mark, not with weapons or fire, but with words, respect, and heart. And that, he knew, was the most powerful victory of all.